Hello, everyone. My name is Suzanne Sanger. I'm the Executive Director of the Sunshine Coast Conservation Association. On behalf of the SCCA, Rhizome Up Media, and the Green Film Series, I would like to welcome you all to our 5th annual World Oceans Day event and the 3rd talk in our 2022 Nemo Talk series. The SCCA works in the territories of the Squamish, Sechelt, Tla'amin, Klahoose, and Homolko First Nations. I'm zooming in today from Chequelt and Gibsons at Catsum House Sound. The SCCA is very grateful to the First Nations in this region for stewarding these lands and waters from time immemorial. We honor and respect the reverence the First Nations have always had for nature and their ancestral and eternal connection with their lands and waters. It is in this spirit of connection between all life on our planet that we bring you the World Oceans Day Festival. Every year, people around the world come together to celebrate World Oceans Day. Through the sharing of remarkable feature films and short films, talks, and in-person events, we hope to celebrate, inform, inspire, and cultivate connection between people and place, to raise awareness of the role of our oceans in our everyday lives and their connection with all living things. The Nemo Talk series specifically aims to link people up with local projects, to explore conservation initiatives going on in the region and find ways to bridge and support restoration and conservation and science activities to restore habitats on the coast and beyond. Today, we will hear from Susie Washington-Smyth and Dr. Martin Wale about the work they're doing through the Saturna Island Research and Education Society and the Southern Gulf Islands Whale Sighting Network. Dr. Wale is a UK-trained medical microbiologist and public health doctor with a background in building successful research partnerships. He is a career-long innovator, recruited to Canada in 2009, working on hospital-acquired infection and building the research program at Island Health. He has a lifelong interest in natural history and is a wildlife photographer. These interests, plus his management skills, led him to becoming president and CEO of the Research and Education Society in 2019. Susie Washington-Smyth is the project coordinator for the Southern Gulf Islands Whale Sighting Network. Prior to moving to Saturna, she worked for over 40 years as an environmental management consultant in both the public and private sectors, as well as serving as a board member for several national and regional conservation not-for-profit organizations. Conscious of the need to build bridges between government, business, and community groups, Susie's focus has been on finding ways to integrate carefully researched science into multi-stakeholder dialogues as a means of making informed decisions. The goal of this presentation is to create awareness of the amazing work these two groups are doing and to inspire the creation of a Sunshine Coast-based whale sighting group. Susie and Martin, I'll pass it over to you to share your screen and start your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're good to go. I'll start off and then hand over to Susie. Could we have the next slide, please? So I'm President and CEO of SIMRES, which is a small non-profit charitable status on and Saturna Island. And in speaking from here, I acknowledge the ancestral territories of the Coast and Straits Salish peoples, particularly the Sayot and Sakem nations, their pre-Confederate Douglas Treaty rights, and their asserted Aboriginal rights and title in this area. SIMRES started off in 2014 and has had hydrophones in Boundary Pass most of the time since then. We can talk about that later if you'd like. We're part of the BC Coast Hydrophone Network with Orca Lab and the North Coast Cetacean Society. And we've been widely active in cetacean research and education in collaboration with Simon Fraser University, University of Victoria, and others. We're a platform organization. We will work with anybody who wants to do work on Saturna and provide them with resources and things. I wanted to show you this. This is one of the reasons why this is my favorite humpback. This is a humpback called Heather with her calf near-wise. And the really cool thing about this is that I'm looking at Heather, and just below the blowhole, you can see Heather's eye, and she's looking at me. So we're mutually observing each other. Next, please.
Oh, sorry.
I'll hand over now. Mostly we're going to talk about southern residents, because southern residents is a SARA designated critically endangered species are where the funding tends to flow from. Humpbacks, people are no longer very interested in that because there's not much money attached to that. But we've seen a lot of humpbacks, and I think humpbacks are a major success story. But we just love whales. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Susie. Thank you.
Yes. Well, here's another example of the southern residents. Martin doesn't like this photograph because it's fuzzy, but I love it because you can actually see them blowing, which is not often the case. So it's kind of a neat thing. I wanted to talk a little bit about who we are and how we got started, because if in fact the Sunshine Coast Conservation Association wants to start a whale sighting network, I think it's important to kind of get a feel for how it kind of grew. But islanders like you are concerned about all the whales in the Salish Sea. It doesn't matter whether they're endangered or not. In fact, they're our nearest neighbors. And so we, of course, we want to make sure that they're well fed and they're safe. The government of Canada, under the Species at Risk Act, has a responsibility to protect the southern residents. The humpbacks and the bigs are considered threatened, but they're not part of this, the critical list, and therefore, as Martin suggested, they don't get much money. The federal government, in their wisdom, created a number of management measures to protect the critical habitat for the southern residents. They created 3 interim sanctuary zones, one off Saturna, one off Pender, and one off Swiss Bank on the west coast of Vancouver Island. They also instituted a voluntary vessel slowdown for the large tankers that regularly go on Boundary Pass. And that has been actually very successful, but it only goes for 6 months of the year. So it's sort of like fixing a broken leg for half time. And there are other measures such as vessel approach guidelines, fishery closures, salmon enhancement, and of course, trying to clean up the pollutants. The noise factor, the interim sanctuary zones, the vessel slowdown, and the vessel approach guidelines are all about noise. And those are things that people can do now. The salmon enhancement programs, the pollutant cleanup, those are a much longer term. So when the federal government came to Saturna, they came talking about the interim sanctuary zones, and we asked them specifically, how did you design them? And they sort of said, well, we don't really have a whole lot of data. They didn't say that quite specifically, but that's what they inferred. And they said, we base this on the precautionary principle. And for those of us who were around in the 80s working, that was part of the precautionary principle, was to try and understand what are the environmental indicators that sort of lead to success for that. And having been involved in that, I raised my hand and said, well, in order to have precautionary principles, you have to have adaptive environmental management. What are your measures in place? And they couldn't do it. And every now and then I get cranky and get out of my garden. And this was one of those times. Wendy's laughing because she knows. And because there was so little research at the eastern end of Boundary Pass in terms of the southern residents, as well as for humpbacks and for bigs, I reached out to my neighbors because we all whale watch. We all are interested in trying to understand the diversity, the frequency, the distribution, and the types of whales. So in doing so, we asked for help from our friends. The obvious thing was SIMRES. And I have to say that we couldn't exist without SIMRES. We have a integrated collaborative relationship. They certainly provide all the administrative and scientific support for us. And we work very closely with OceanWise, the BC Cetacean Sighting Network. And we have created with them separate portals for each of the islands. I forgot to mention that we started out on Saturna. Last year, we went to Pender and have worked with them very successfully for over a year. And this year we've started with Maine. And we are hoping that you may be interested, and Galliano has reached out to us. So there is a high level of interest in all of us who live along the Salish Sea. And it's nobody's really thought to harness the power of citizen science to do that. We just happen to be at the right place at the right time. One of the things that we learned fairly early on when tracking whales through the BC Cetacean Sighting Network, I should mention that we have separate portals for each of the islands so that we can disaggregate the data, and we of course can aggregate it so that we can look at the travel patterns of the whales, which I'll show you in just a minute. We also, in doing so, developed a very close relationship through SIMRES with Simon Fraser University through their environmental restoration department. And we're now in year 3 of having master's students who do their field research on Saturna and do it to track whales and the vessel interaction. Because one of the things I think we realized in year 1 is that you can't look at whales without looking at vessel interactions, because the two are it's not a pristine environment. So one of the things that we started to do in year 1 was to monitor and assess compliance in the sanctuary zone. I'll talk about that in a minute. We reached out to Fisheries and Oceans fairly early on, and they've been incredibly supportive and would be welcome an opportunity to work with people up in the northern part of the Salish Sea as well to monitor compliance with fishing and marine mammal regulations. They suffer from a shortage of staff, and so they are happy to have well-trained eyes on the water to help them with fisheries violations and marine mammal violations. I can talk a little bit about that. Fishery violations are easy to do. Marine mammal violations are more complicated because they are through the Fisheries Act and you have to go to court, and it's very complicated. Fisheries, you can just issue a ticket. But there's all kinds of other things they can do. And so we can talk about that. And of course, because Parks Canada has such a visible presence on Saturna and Maine, and Pender, we have a very close working relationship with Parks Canada, both the interpretation and the warden side. The wardens are, as the fisheries officers, very willing to work with us in terms of compliance in the sanctuary zones and in and around. And we have a difficult and challenging working relationship with Transport Canada. So what have we found? Well, the most important thing, I think, and I think it surprised everybody, including fisheries and ocean scientists, and certainly Transport Canada and us for that matter, the whales are here year round. In the past, there was this feeling that whales came in the spring, summer, and fall and left and went offshore in the winter. That's not the case. And here is the data to prove this. This is just done through the first few days of June. So you can see the 2022 is in yellow. 2021 is a dark blue, and the 2020 is the lighter blue. But I think we can demonstrate that they're here. And they're all kinds. So we have humpbacks, we have bigs or transients, and of course we have the southern residents. And if I could get these slides to work, there's the southern residents. And one of the things that I think is really important is because the feds seem to be really focused on the southern residents as they are required to do under the Species at Risk Act, they designed their management measures on what was then available data. And because the Southern residents hadn't really been around Saturna and Pender in the winter in 2015, from 2015 on to 2018, 2019, they designed the management measures, the interim sanctuary zone, the echo vessel slowdown, the fisheries closures, all of those kinds of things, the noise mitigating management measures for summer months only. Originally, they went from July 1st through October. Last year, it went from July 1st through the end of November. This year, it's from June 1st or whenever the Southern residents show up until the end of November for the interim sanctuary zones, and the same for the fisheries and the vessel slowdown. So what is interesting is Granny, who was the senior matriarch of JPOD, which really traditionally has been used the Southern Gulf Islands as their feeding area, died some years ago. And there was, I think, a 2-year transition where they were exploring where to go, what to eat, where to be. And so we didn't see them very much in May and June of the last 2 years. That has changed. And you can see again in 2022, they have been around in the winter months. What is significant, in one of the things that we're particularly concerned about, is that the vessel slowdown only starts when they're first seen around June, and the interim sanctuaries only start until June. That doesn't work if you want to protect endangered species. Nobody knew this before. So here's an example of our data. This is last week's sightings. This gives you I think the excitement that it demonstrates kind of the excitement you see. The blue ones are humpbacks. We've had a lot of humpback sightings every day. The blue circles are the around the orcas are the Southern residents. The red circles are the bigs or the transients. And as you can see, they're around. And what's so interesting is they go down, their travel pattern tends to be to go through either come down, off, and up through Swanson Channel on the west side of Pender, up through Active Pass in between Maine and Galliano, down Georgia Strait, or up to the Fraser, and then perhaps up to you, but down to us, and then they make a hard right and head west, or they'll go south to Puget Sound. The bigs, on the other hand, tend to go from west to east and then off in different places. This last time that we saw the Southern residents, it was initially they came from the west instead of from the north, and then went from east to west. So, but they also circled back. So it really depends on where the salmon is, what's happening, things like that. I think you all know that there are the Southern residents like Chinook salmon the best. They'll eat other things, but it's really salmon dependent. But this will give you a feel for what we see on a weekly basis. Well, as I mentioned earlier, you can't look at whales in the Southern Gulf Islands without looking at vessels. So in Boundary Pass, we have, all kinds of shipping every day. Everything from barges to, oil tankers, to coal tankers, to logs, to, all the cargo ships that come in and out of Vancouver Island. It's a busy, busy area, and could be busier if they decide in their wisdom to approve Roberts Bank, which we hope they won't. What is interesting is they have been fairly, it's a voluntary compliance, but it's been about 85 to 88% slowdown. What hasn't been successful are the small vessels, and in and around the Southern Gulf Islands, particularly from May through October, depending on the year, there is a high number of recreational vessels and recreational fishermen. And they don't obey the rules. And so we, particularly in 2019 and 2020, the vessel compliance was really low in the interim sanctuaries, both on Saturna and Pender. And last year it was improved, but the total number of vessels increased. Percentage-wise, it improved, but the total number increased. So the noise increased. That doesn't even account for the whale watching boats. And the last 2 years, we've had COVID, so we didn't have US vessels. We have in less than a month, since the border has been open, we've had twice as many whale watching boats in and around the Southern Gulf Islands. And they obey the letter of the order, the ministerial order, but neither the spirit or the intent. So they ride right along the edge of the interim sanctuary zones. They leapfrog. The federal government, in its wisdom, has not limited the number of whale watching boats that can be around a whale at any one time. There's 150 whale watching boats, US and Canadian, between Campbell River and Victoria and White Rock that are in and around whales almost all the time. And we have, our sighters are now documenting that whales are followed. It's like paparazzi, following the whales 5 to 8 hours a day. That isn't even those recreational vessels that don't obey the rules and are sort of like kamikazes. They're in and around, they go right up to the whales, and I think the saddest part of all, the weakest part of the management measure is the enforcement regime. Wendy's shaking her head because it's traditionally the case in environmental law. But this is abysmal. And Martin's words are, it is underwhelming at best. But basically, Transport Canada doesn't have any boats on the water. They are responsible for the ministerial order. Those agencies that have boats on the water, Parks Canada, Fisheries and Oceans, RCMP, and Coast Guard, all have other things to do. And they don't have extra funding, nor do they have extra staff to enforce the interim sanctuary zones, or for that matter, the fisheries closures. So they have really relied on us, particularly those of us who live on Saturna and Pender, because we live right above the interim sanctuary zones. So we can see it in real time. So I think that's super important. The other thing that they say that they are particularly interested in having more sighters is they're very concerned with active pass, and they're very concerned of what happens north of the Fraser River, because that has been understudied, I guess, if that's the right word. So they are looking for help. So what have we, I guess, just to sum up, what have we found? Year-round presence of whales, including the southern residents. Despite the marine mammal fishing regulations, recreational boaters and the whale watching are non-compliant. I think, can safely say that the safe places to reduce noise are critical for the southern residents. We have been able to track the amount of time that the southern residents are in the sanctuary zones feeding. So it's clearly they're an important feeding area, but they don't work as designed. They're only part-time, and they're very poorly enforced. And I think we can say that for the 6 months that the ECHO program is operational, there's high compliance with vessel slowdown. But again, you can't fix a broken leg half-time. So where are we going from here? One of the things that I think is really important to both SIMRES and the Southern Gulf Islands whale sighting networks, we want to share our research with community groups. We think that there is power to the people, to use an old 60s term. But I think that there is an opportunity for community groups up and down the coast to work together to collect good data so that we can begin to influence change. It is helpful both to government, but also to NGOs. I know that, you know, the traditional environmental groups don't have the hard science behind them the way we are collecting data. So we've begun to work with them because they are able to have the ear of the ministers in a way that we as a small local group don't. From the science side, what we want to do is incorporate the hydrophones with our data more regularly. We have access now on Saturna to an infrared camera, and they will on Pender. It's something that DFO is very interested in. I talked about working with other whale researchers up and down the coast. Obviously, we need to advocate strongly for enforceable sanctuaries for the southern residents and the slowdown in Boundary Pass. And I think one of the things that we have learned, because the lack of commitment to sustainable whale watching on the part of the Pacific Whale Watching Association, is to advocate for no exceptions and enforcement of a 400-meter distance from all whales, not just the southern residents. So this was a poster that our science master's students did at the Sailor Sea Ecosystem Conference. It really was a scientific based thing that I just wanted to demonstrate that we do that kind of presentation as well. And maybe this is a good time to ask for questions or comments, because I think I gave you, Martin, is there anything I left out?
No, I think that was very comprehensive. It's what I would say is it's just extraordinarily exciting. One thing Susie didn't talk about was the fact that we have a communications platform called Discord. And so anybody who is in the CITES network, which is, and it's confidential, so that it doesn't get onto Facebook, and people who drive whale watching boats or recreational boaters who want to go and see whales won't necessarily hear about this, but it's confidential to the CITES. And so we all know in real time what anybody is seeing.
Yes, if I can speak to that, one of the really cool things about it is you have it's like many of you may have used Slack. It's not dissimilar to that. It's more well articulated, I guess. And so we have an opportunity to have, for example, the identification keys. Each island has its own sighting conversation, so people on Saturna can chat with each other, but people from Maine and Pender can see it. So if somebody's seeing a whale that's heading west, we say, as we did this morning, there's a humpback heading west. People on Pender then were alerted and able to see it. And people on South Pender can say, whale heading north on Swanson's Channel, so people in North Pender know that they are, or people in North Pender can say whale heading toward Active Pass, and people in Maine know that it's coming that way. So there is the loop thing, but we also have access to whale research. We have a way to upload photos. We have enforcement channel, so that if there are problems with infractions in the interim sanctuary zones or fishing violations, which we have noticed a lot of, then people can chat about that. So there's a whole sort of interaction which has built a community. I should mention that we've got 50 sighters on the 3 islands. Not everybody is active, but we have the capacity. And so if they happen to be home, they'll watch. And one of the strengths is we build in redundancy, because not everybody's home all the time. And so if I'm not home, somebody down the road is looking and reporting. So we report on Discord and we report on the BC Cetacean Sighting Network. And if we see an infraction, we have a Google Doc that we fill out and send to DFO. So it's a really I've never been in an environmental or conservation group where there's been this much chatter, and it's very horizontal. There's not, I may be the coordinator, but it's individual driven. And that's the most exciting part, is that there is a real spirit of community. So questions, comments?
I'm going to jump in for a second, Susie and Martin, and just say thank you so much. You guys are doing a lot. There's a lot going on. I just want to, maybe you could stop sharing your screen. We'll change it to gallery view. And I just wanted to let people know I'll be moderating the questions. So if you want to either raise your hand using the raise hand function down at the bottom of your screen, or pop a question into the chat, and then I can moderate if we need to. It's not a huge group, but that'll just help us.
Sure. I just have to say that this last photo was taken by Martin off my party deck. That was 10 days ago, or less than 10 days ago. So it's amazing what you see once you start looking.
That whale looks like it's ready for a party.
It is.
I have some questions, Susie, and they're around the role of the volunteers. I wondered how many volunteers, like maybe just use Saturna as an example, how many whale watching or sighting volunteers do you have, and what do they have to do physically to record a sighting, and what kind of knowledge, like do they need to know latitude and longitude? And I'm just wondering about how that all works.
Okay. Well, each island has its own coordinator. So if you, for example, Sunshine Coast wanted to do it, you would need your own coordinator. And what I rely on the coordinator to do is to round up the number of people that you have. And each island is different, because Saturna is been at this now for 3+ years. We have slightly more than Pender or Maine. And once the word gets out, more people want to join. One of the things that so it kind of has grown by Topsy. We started out with maybe we had 10 sighters when we started out. Not everybody was, and nobody is active all of the time. Some are more than others, but it really depends on one's personality and one's interest and one's passion. What we designed it initially, for all 3 islands, is we recruited people who were near or adjacent or on areas that we knew there were the whales were there. So for example, everybody knows where the interim sanctuary zones are on Pender and Saturna. So we recruited people on Pender and Saturna. Wendy, you'll appreciate this. We know that the whales come down periodically, Tumbo. And Bigs have been known to come down quite a bit during the winter over the last 2 years. So we recruited people on Tumbo. We haven't, for example, recruited people up at the north end of Saturna, whereas on Pender, they've recruited people on Boundary Pass and up and down Swanson's Channel. So, it was targeted. And we started out small. Now, what we do in terms of training is we work very closely with BC Cetacean Sighting Network, and they have an app called the Whale Report. And so the individual who's responsible for that, Aaron Purdy, and I run a training session for all sighters, so that we work directly with, say, a group of 5 to 10 people, and we will train you in terms of how to sight, how to report. And the app is really great because it automatically sort of sights the whale. So it's pretty easy to, once you put the data in. Interesting thing that I've observed is the longer you do this, the more you not only recognize the difference between the ecotypes between the Bigs and the southern residents, you get to know the individuals, which is really interesting. Like we have sighters who are, I'm going to say, as knowledgeable as some of the fisheries and ocean scientists in terms of identification of individuals. I think that's super cool. So that again depends on your passion and your enthusiasm. The other thing that we do is we train everybody on how to use Discord and what's available. And we monitor that very closely. The only requirement we ask of sighters is that you don't post pictures on Facebook until at least a half an hour after the event. Because the whale watching boats, at least for the islands, are part of our, Saturna Island information Facebook page in Maine and so on. And we aren't interested in, or even recreational vehicles. We aren't interested in having any more people around the whales. We want to encourage watching from shore. That I think is absolutely critical. One of the big pluses of what we're doing is that people realize the value, and in fact, it's better watching from shore than it is paddling or motoring out to see the whales, because you actually have a much better opportunity to really look at them and look at their patterns and all of that stuff. In terms of, and then there is the whole enforcement thing, and up in your area, you wouldn't have the interim sanctuary zones, but you would have marine mammal violations and fisheries violations. I'm not sure, because I haven't looked up there if there's any fisheries closures the way there is down here. But again, there are all kinds of fishing violations, and Fisheries and Oceans is more than happy to come out and do a training session for sighters for how to report an infraction, which has been really helpful for all the sighters. So that's kind of like an overview. The other thing is that, from my perspective as sort of project coordinator, I work not so much with individual sighters as with the coordinators for each of the areas. And I delegate responsibility as much as I possibly can, because I think that that's just the strength of this, that it's a ground up kind of citizen science movement. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks, Susie.
I have to say that it's not, it's become kind of a full-time job right now for me. And it's because we've got a lot of other things happening besides the sighting program. We've got the whale researchers that have had problems with Parks Canada. So we've had negotiations with Parks Canada. And we're also going to try and do a crowdfunding thing. So I'm spending time on that. So I'm busy, but that's my choice. The coordinators for Maine and Pender, it's a volunteer job, so it's as busy as they want it to be. Martin, is there anything you want to add to that? You're muted, Martin.
Yeah, one thing that I was going to add was that for the last 3 years, we've used military grade laser rangefinders, because you get a whale and you get a boat beyond it, and unless you can actually fix the distances, then it's very difficult to establish a violation. And we've gone through a learning process with DFO and the Whale Desk and Fisheries and Oceans, and to a lesser extent Parks Canada, whereby when we first started off, they weren't ever so keen, I felt, on us reporting, because the signal to noise ratio was all wrong. There were lots of rubbish reports. What we now report is really high quality. And so they believed it, and they have come to realize that this is making a positive contribution. And that's why they're so engaged in the training. We'll have Fisheries and Oceans bring a boat out and run around the margins of the sanctuary zone, so that the sighters can be familiar with where it is.
Great.
I have a question. Well, I have a few. I'm really excited about sort of the level of, or the caliber of the work that you're doing, the high quality science, the high tech, equipment that you're using that then results in good data. And so I'm just very excited that you're bringing that to the citizen science level so that, you know, community members could be trained and then you have access to this and then, you know, be able to contribute to the data. So my first question is where, you know, where on the coast would you target people that could get involved in a whale sighting group?
So I'm quite sure that you have people on the coast who already are doing high caliber photography.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're already keen. And what you're providing them with then is more impact for their photographs. And we've got many high capability photographers along Cliffside.
Right. Okay, so it's really like one of the things that the SCCA can do is to really reach out to the people that are already sighting and they're already taking photographs and link them in with you to share that. And if we were going to create a group on the coast, you, Susie, you talked about, you know, that you target people where the whales are moving, and so and where they are, not, you know, trying to gather people from all different places and be staring out at the water where they aren't. So are there places where you're missing sightings, where you're missing, you know, are there gaps?
Yes, there are, but you know, the wonderful thing about citizen science is it's organic and it happens when it happens. And I'm really excited about Galliano because Active Pass is a critical habitat for the southern residents, and it's a really busy ferry and other boating kind of place because even the tankers use it periodically as an alternative. What they don't need are whale watching boats and recreational fishers. So if we can provide good hard data to Fisheries Ocean, then they have the data to be able to go to the politicians and say, hey, this is, you know, whatever. So yeah, that's one area. And I frankly don't know what you guys see up there. I wasn't even sure what we saw because it wasn't organized. Everybody was in their own little home or silo looking at whales and didn't share. We now have the capability to share, and that's made it a big change. So that's something I think will emerge. But I gather you have humpbacks. I gather you get northern and southern residents. That's what I did a little bit of research. So it will be exciting to find out if you guys decide to do this, what in fact you see.
We've had a gray whale hanging around for the last month that everybody's been very excited about.
Yeah.
2 gray whales.
Yes,
Yeah.
2. Yeah.
But just to give you an example, Suzanne, of what you mean, just out there is Tembo Island, which is a parks island with no houses on it. And so we can't see what's the other side of that. We want to put a hydrophone on there, but that's all sorts of difficulty.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
we've got a hand up. We've got a hand
I'm going to
raised.
put Billy's hand up right now because I know she sees the whales, and I imagine you're muted.
Yeah, hi. I'm late on dropping into your webinar here, so I missed some of your early things, but I'm just so excited to hear about the group and how it works. And I had no idea that there was training with the DFO. So that is so amazing. Now I live on Whitaker Bay, which is close to Bonnybrook and Camp Bing, and I have just an amazing view of the bay and across the strait. And one of the and I just heard this mention of the rangefinders, because of course the biggest thing that happens, what I can see, is that the notice comes out on Facebook and then 5 whale watching boats converge from all the way across from Vancouver Island and down from the north and up from the south, and there's and then there's 5 of them with just brutally following the whales. And I have no, and I mean, they say there's a 400-meter distance they're supposed to keep, but I have no way of knowing what that distance is, right, from where I can see. but it disturbs me greatly. And so I see two things that are big issues for us here. One is the Facebook group,
Mhm,
which is just like the instant there's a whale, there's a posting.
mhm.
And I think that's really a huge problem. Now, I haven't been in touch with the you know, the putting the sightings out there to the cetacean group. But boy, I think there's a lot of room for us to do stuff here, and I'm very excited about it and so thrilled that you came and did this talk. So don't really
Yeah.
have a question, but those are my points of where I am.
My suggestion would be to recruit people from the Facebook group.
Yeah. that's
Yes,
obvious.
exactly.
Already.
Yes. Yes.
All right.
And I think, if we decide to go there, then, we would I would make a commitment to come up there. I think it would be really important. I found we did videotape our training on Maine for other people. And my experience is, and it's a great, training video, but it's so much better in person and to make people actually show up in person and or on Zoom. But I would come, I have a good reason to come up to the Sunshine Coast. And so, yeah, I mean, we could do it. We could do that.
Yeah.
And I know that the BC cetacean sighting guy would probably do it, or we could, loop him in through Zoom. It's easy. And I think having the personal touch is really important. And then some of these problems that you talk about, particularly how to encourage the Facebook group folks to be more respectful, not to be so anthrocentric, but to be more, it's about the whales instead of us.
Mhm.
And that's a different way of thinking about it. And it's been challenging because I like to paddle, and there's lots of kayakers and stuff, but I have to say people have really changed their behavior about this, and that's important. And so if you can not only be sighting but be an advocate for the whales, that's even better.
Yeah,
Great.
that's amazing. Thank you. We're going to
Yeah.
do that, and I'm going to share these videos and some of the links to the amazing films that we have about the whales and the bad things that are happening for them in
Yeah.
Facebook groups again. So Leanne's got her hand up.
Yeah, I'm like Billy, I just wanted to comment. I've spent a couple of summers up in the Discovery Islands and around here, and I know that the whale watchers, who are extremely offensive in our waters and do not observe any distance from any type of whale, have their own communications devices, including using drones. And so I think it's a mistake to kind of look at Facebook, our local Facebook group, as a source of information, when I know that the main purveyor of whale watching from Horseshoe Bay uses their own information. And we also have a lot of whale activity in Howe Sound, bigs especially this past winter. They were just here all winter long. And Bowen Island would be another very likely target for starting up. And the people who live on the east side of Keats, as well as anyone living up strangely enough, towards the mill on Gambier, because they seem to come down between Gambier and the mill in that area of Howe Sound on their way back out to Georgia Strait. So it would be fascinating if we could get some Howe Sound folks to do some monitoring in this area, as well as on the Georgia Strait side. And there's also
So,
a cluster
Leanne, let
of
me ask you-
places.
Let me
There's a
ask something. If Does it make sense to include Bowen and Keats and Gambier in the Sunshine Coast
Yes.
network? In other words,
Probably.
Yes, yes. So I'm, involved with the at Cats and House Sound Biosphere Region Initiative Society. The
Yeah.
SCCA partners with the
Yes.
Gambier Island Conservancy on conservation covenants on lands on Gambier and on Keats. So we're very connected with these groups, and I think we should
Mhm.
definitely include Howe Sound. We always say that SCCA, deals with the lands and waters from Howe Sound to Hamatco. So yeah.
Mhm.
And there's a hugely active group, Susie, in Howe Sound on the marine issues. They're really connected with Ocean
Yes,
Watch, with the Ocean Watch reports and Ocean Wise.
Yes.
And so, yes, Leanne's 100% right on that. And I think that our group would benefit from pulling in those folks and that energy as well.
Mhm.
and that has implications in terms of management. Leanne, I am super conscious of the concerns about Facebook. I don't know if you
Yeah.
were here, but really the only requirement we have is that people who are part of the sighting network do not post on Facebook for at least a half an hour after
Oh, yeah.
an event. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the strength of Discord, the strength of our own internal communication network is that it is internal and it's only for sighters, and it's only nobody can join it without actually without my okay and or the okay of the project coordinator for the Sunshine Coast. I think if all of you, so in other words, the coast and Bowen and Keats and Gambier, we would probably in blue skying, I would say that it would be a Discord system than the one we have for the Southern Gulf Islands, but connected.
Yeah. Mhm.
Because I think will have a different set of travel patterns than we do.
Yes.
But we can communicate with each other. And I think that's good. And
Mhm.
we would all still work through the BC Cetacean Sighting Network
Yes.
and SIMRES.
Just to give, and SIMRES is happy to be involved. Just to give you a little bit of a taster. Susie's very strict and very good about this stuff, and very capable in terms of organizing. We had a lady on the island who was reporting to Facebook a little bit too freely. So she got suspended from the Sighters group, and she was devastated. And she's now become a model citizen, and we've let her back in. So Susie's been very effective.
Yeah, I think mostly people want to do the right thing. And if they're given an opportunity to do the right thing and encouraged. Yes, absolutely. I wanted to just talk a little bit about data management. Somebody raised that because that's an important part of what we do. We have access to a data management scientist, and one of our master's students has really upped her skills in terms of data management as well. So it's not enough just to cite and to record and to have that cute little visual about what we see, but we were able to do those charts because we have good data management. So we can look at, for example, everything down to, do whales travel east or west when there's slack current? Or if the current's changing, which direction are they going in? What kind of feeding happens during? So we can get that specific if we really want to. We haven't done, but it's something I'd like to do, is to look at whales and the large vessels that are going back and forth in Boundary Pass. That's unique to Saturna and Pender, but it's a big issue and nobody has looked at it, including Fisheries and Oceans, and especially not Transport Canada. They have not looked at whale activity and compared it to boating. What they hear, is there an issue between orca communication when the big tankers are coming, that kind of stuff. So, there's the sky is the limit. It just depends on one's passion and volunteerism. and we all live in communities where volunteerism is what makes this work.
That's amazing. I see there are so many potential opportunities, and as you reflected before, Susie, that it's, you know, it's organic. So, you know, basically I feel like the next step for us will be to sort of, you know, share this information, share this presentation with people, send out some invitations to the community to say, look, you know, we want to get together and we want to start a group on the coast. Just jump in and really leave it like a really wide invitation for people who want to, you know, help with the whales, whether it's science or whether it's photography or whatever. Just really start something and pull in the Howe Sound people and see where it goes from there.
And I would think that a small group of us, and maybe those of us here, could meet and, you know, kind of be the core of that, Suzanne, and actually so that there's some structure to it. And, you know, I'm certainly willing to be on a committee or a group that would move this forward. I don't want to be the coordinator, but I'm willing to do some work and definitely willing to be part of a team that's doing this. So, yeah.
I think it would work too to be starting with a training session, an in-person training session, you know, with the DFO to just get that interest sparked there. That
Actually,
would be my,
yeah, I don't think that's a good idea.
no,
I think you need to get a core group of people first. And then we can, once you have a core group of people, not your planning group, but your planning group has to, I'm happy to work with the planning group to, you know, give you what the tools that you need and share more information with you. But you need to get a group of people who are committed to wanting to get trained and are committed to making a commitment to track whales from shore first. And then I think we can ask Oceanwise and DFO to come and we would do a training session. But before that, I don't feel comfortable asking them. They are so overstretched and so understaffed. And every time that we ask them to do something like this, it means that they are not on the water where they really should be.
That's really good advice. And I have to say, this is sort of what we did with the stream keepers. You know, we're collaborating with Sunshine Coast stream keepers, and our Diane Sanford and Angela Kronig have helped us train up. You know, we've got a pet project on Checkwell, Gibson's Creek. So we started a little group, and that's basically how we did it, was say, okay, you know, we want to bring people together. If you have an interest in this creek, this space, then we'll train you and go from there. So yeah, I like that approach, and I think that could work for us. I had one other question, and we should probably wrap up soon, but it was about the fisheries closures. Susie, we do have fisheries closures for around the like DFO closures around the glass sponge reefs in Howe Sound, and this has been an ongoing issue. We've seen some illegal fishing, prawning lately around there. So like, I think, you know, those training for, is it the Guardians program? I mean, you know, like reporting infractions, I guess, is another thing that I think our community would possibly be interested in as well. So just to put that out there.
Well, as I said earlier, fishing violations are something that Fisheries and Oceans can deal with pretty quickly. They can issue a ticket. Marine mammal infractions are much more complicated. And boy, if there was something that needed to be changed, that's one piece of the Fisheries Act that needs to change, among others. But
well, we advocate for changes to legislation as well, so maybe we can work on that.
Okay, yeah, well, I think having the data is really important.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I think we have a plan for next steps, really, is to start a core group, and Wendy and I'm sure that we've got Billy and some others. Anthony, where are you? We're going to pull you in, and we'll get that going, and then we'll reach out to you, Susie, and we'll go from there.
Sounds great.
It's awesome. This is exactly what the hope and the plan for these Nemo talks in this series was really about, was to connect and to keep moving the good work forward and building those connections. So I'm really excited.
Let me know how I can help, Suzanne.
I will, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll start an email around once
Yeah.
we're
And
Great.
the other thing I was going to say, it's not just us, it's SIMRES, because I think one of the things that SIMRES can bring to the table is connections through universities to help you find other students perhaps who are willing to do field research, and just generally the sort of connection with the larger marine mammal hydrophone units and things like that. So there's a lot of stuff that can happen.
Yeah, that's amazing. Awesome. Okay.
Great.
So
Nice
we're
chatting with everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susie and Martin.
Lovely to see all of you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.